Well, I'll say a couple of things. First, I may be a pioneer, but I'm an awfully tired pioneer because of yesterday. And my second comment is, thank you for the lovely words and remarks, undeserved, but I would ask the question, why do we even have doors in academia? Why do we need to open them? Why aren't we having an exchange, an equitable exchange? I think the doors are the problem, and you'll see why in my presentation. So first of all, I'm going to do a very small primer on Indian country today, if you will, and extend some of the comments that Carrie made. And I think it's just to help you all understand the context in which we do our research. So first of all, the United States has 574 federally recognized tribes by the Bureau of Indian Affairs. Not all of them have reservations. And you can see on this map that most reservation lands or Alaska Native villages are in the western part of the United States and concentrated in several states. The second thing that most people are not cognizant about is that most American Indian and Alaska Native people do not live on a reservation. Only 13% live on a reservation as of the last census or on trust lands. And they are more rural, even with this low percentage, than most other minoritized population. You can see 87% live outside of a reservation in some sort of urbanized community, and it's been going up. This slide shows some of the social injustices. Now, we don't like to talk about all the deficits, but I think it's important to understand the context in which we are trying to do our work. And the context is that the median household income in a Native family is far lower than in any other US population. The life expectancy is 11 years less, a decade less than in the US population. The percent homeownership is far lower. And check out the individual poverty rate. It's 4 times, 3 times, do my math. So these are the circumstances in which we are trying to conduct our research. So Carrie mentioned tribal sovereignty. Domestic sovereign nations are what tribes are. But again, remember, most Native people do not live on a reservation. But if we are doing work with a reservation where most research is done today, this is the definition of tribal sovereignty by the National Congress of American Indians, which is the national organization that represents all federally and state recognized tribes. What does that mean? What does that mean logistically, technically, philosophically? It means that tribes control the things that in our lives are controlled by the city, the state, the US federal government. Things like infrastructure and housing, education and culture, healthcare, human services, economic development. You go on a reservation, there are tribal police. So all aspects of life are controlled by the tribe. That's what being a domestic sovereign nation means. And that means you have to go through a whole series of other steps to conduct your research. So Native people who live in the US can get care, just like veterans can get care through a special system. In the US, there's something called the ITU system of care. And there are 3 components to that system of care. The first one is called the Indian Health Service. Most people have heard about the Indian Health Service. There are 2,000 what we call direct service primary care facilities operated by the federal government. And all they provide, except in Alaska, is primary care and dental services. Nothing else, no specialty care. Now, here's a couple examples of structural racism that are actually data. The facilities receive 59% of the calculated full costs of delivering care to these Native people. The per capita spending per American Indian Alaska Native enrollee is $3,000 plus versus $8,000 per another US citizen. This is structural racism at its finest. So we also have tribal clinics. These are called 638 tribes because of a law that was passed in 1972, the Self-Determination Act. And it allows tribal governments to take the money from the federal government and operate their own clinics. And then we have 41 urban Indian health programs located in places where large populations of Indian people live. So what do we know about our Native elders? Well, they're a population at high risk, just like elders in all of your minoritized population. There are almost 500,000 of them right now that are age 65 and older, but we'll say that in Native communities, the age of an elder is considered 55 and older, and their programs are actually thresholded at 55 and older, not 65 in general. This good news for Indian people, that number is going to triple by 2050, and the number of elders ages 85 and older is going to go up 7-fold. There are no resources for these people. Some of the demographic and socioeconomic risk factors are shown here. You know, you're all familiar with them: poor educational attainment, poor quality education, rurality, poverty, clinical risk factors that many of your populations deal with, like hypertension, diabetes, obesity, renal failure, head trauma, you know, the list goes on. And one interesting thing is that in our work, the ApoE4 gene does not appear to confer a risk of dementia. So there's something protective going on, whether it's culture, whether it's communal activities, whether it's something else, we have no idea. So this is just a slide to show these are our NIH-funded grants since 1998, working on aging and American Indian Alaska Native, and more recently in the last 10 years, Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander health, and in particular, brain health. So you can see we've had quite a number of projects that have all fed into each other to create the program that we have. It includes a bunch of diversity supplements and K awards and other activities that have brought junior Native individuals to the forefront. So I'm going to talk a little bit about research participation. So this is a slide that summarizes some of our work with partners. One of them, the National Indian Council on Aging, which is the national organization for older Native elders, and with a couple of tribal and urban health programs. And we conducted focus groups, we did vignette studies, and we did surveys with 211 elders ages 55 and older. And this just shows some of the themes that came out from the integrated data. First of all, there is a huge need for Alzheimer's or ADRD awareness and education. They are hungry for it. Secondly, there's a lot of distrust, just like in your communities, especially towards non-Native researchers. However, 75% of individuals in these studies were willing to participate in ADRD research if they knew the research would benefit their community. These people are altruistic. They want to do the work for the next generation. 74% were willing to participate if they received information about their own health, which speaks to some comments yesterday about returning results to your community There were also, I think it's probably not on there, 69% were willing if paid for participation. So when you talk about ADRCs with their clinical course who don't pay people to participate, this is not aligned with our philosophy at working with Native individuals. There's one that's not on here, which I should mention. 74% were willing to participate in a genetic study. And then the worst is 48% were willing to participate if the study was funded by the federal government. So don't say your study's funded by NIH. So some of the results from the vignettes that we did. Vignettes are a short story, and then they ask a series of questions. Would you participate if? Would you participate if? And then they list salient features. So I thought some of these were really interesting. 75% would undergo cognitive testing. 73% would undergo an MRI. 73% would donate a saliva sample for a genetic test, which is always talked about as being taboo. 69% a blood test for a genetic test, and even 32% would donate their brain to help researchers understand ADRD. Again, like in other studies, lumbar punctures are not very popular. So these are a list of recommendations that our team put together. They're really no different than recommendations that all of you have stated yesterday, but basically recruit through known channels, community health workers, other people, ambassadors that are known to your community. Make sure that you include the people that you're trying to include in your team. Offer options for level of participation. There can't just be a one-size-fits-all. Provide welcoming activities and awareness and education, and I'll show you in a minute some of the things we do. And then disseminate information through Native channels so it gets to the people that you're trying to reach. Putting up a flyer, in the university cafeteria is not going to work. So Carrie mentioned some of these early studies. There's a famous study in Indian country called Strong Heart Study. We did not do this study, although we collaborated with them on trainees and using some of their data for some of our work. But they conducted basically a cardiovascular disease epidemiologic study. And it covered 13 communities in 4 states. And they went to the tribal rolls, which is the only way that you can get a population-based sample working with American Indian Alaska Natives, because they don't live in neighborhoods and they don't have last names that are identifiable. So there is no way that you can actually find Native people in urban settings. And in reservation settings, you can go to the tribal rolls. So you have a population-based sample. These people, the Strong Heart study went to the tribes. They got 88% of the people that were eligible on the tribal rolls to participate. We started working with them in 2010 and said, well, heart disease is related to Alzheimer's, to vascular brain injury. Can we work with you? We recruited 87% of eligible individuals on our first grant. And in our second follow-up grant, we recruited 76%. So it can be done. You need to work with the right people, and you need to have your feet on the ground. This is another study that we're doing. We have a PO1 from NIA that's called Natives Engaging in Alzheimer's Research, or NEAR. It features 12 American Indian, Alaska Native, Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander investigators, because it also includes the Pacific Island group. We have a recruitment and engagement core, and they conduct something called brain trains. These are highly interactive events that have food and music. And I'll show you a snippet in a moment. The goal is to increase biospecimen collection We're shooting for about 2,500 samples. Other goals are to educate our elders and to just engage them in the whole research process and what is done and how it's done. We use informational pamphlets, brochures. We have American Indian, Alaska Native, and Pacific Islander staff. And these people go from station to station, which is why we called it a brain train, but it has other names at different locations. But basically, they go from station to station, and they participate in procedures that you would if you were in a study, like measuring the blood pressure, et cetera. This is one page out of like a 20-page booklet that shows, here's the test we're doing, and then the next page shows them their results. And then this booklet is one that they can take home. Okay. So this is just a little video.
Well, research studies of the past haven't always taken Native values and protocols into consideration. That is why we work towards a reciprocal relationship with community members. Our slogan for this health fair is Healthy Brain, Healthy Life. We will be able to provide information to individuals, collect data, and come to an understanding on how we can best serve Native elders and find ways to address Alzheimer's disease.
So these are the brain train sites, the size and lessons learned. You can see we've done them all over the place, including in American Samoa to recruit Pacific Islanders, but basically urban areas, rural areas. And one of the things I just want to note is that we originally were going to do these through a group of satellite centers in which the academic researchers who are all Native would recruit the participants in their networks. And what we found was that the academic researchers, you, me, us, were the gatekeepers. That we are actually diminishing participation by creating barriers and speaking for communities in a way that they don't speak for themselves. And so we have started going directly to the communities. Actually, they have come to us. So we have a long waiting list to do these brain trains. And we have found that 83% of participants voluntarily provided saliva for genetic tests, 30% spontaneously asked for the results, many signed up for a registry, and the reasons they participate is for their kids and for their grandkids and for their families. All right, I'm going to show you a brain train, a couple of snippets from a brain train that we did in Honolulu with the Papalakea, which is a Hawaiian homestead. Hawaiian homestead is, I don't want to say it's kind of like a reservation, but it is lands that you have to have a certain percentage of Native Hawaiian heritage to actually live on a Hawaiian homestead.
Bluebirds fly, and the dream that you did to, oh why can't well, I see trees of green and red roses too. I watch them bloom for me and you, and I think to myself.
And here's another homestead. Then I'll finish up with just two last slides, one of which is a study funded by NIMHD, which is a study not of Alzheimer's, it's a study of recruitment. And what we intended to do was randomize 500 participants into one of three arms, getting a tailored brochure, getting a control brochure, and getting a tailored video. We'll call it recruitment materials. And without walking through this whole schematic, the outcome is whether at the end people agreed to be included in a registry for future research on American Indian and Alaska Native ADRD research. That's our outcome. So it's not any test or anything else. It's how do you recruit? And again, our goal was 500. We revised it to be 1,200. Now we have already screened 1,200. We've enrolled 975, and we're still enrolling. We're working with a small business in the Northern Plains to do this work. So we'll know what works with data. And then the last slide is, again, community screening. These are all events where community came to us and said, would you come to these large events that we're having and screen our elders? You can see some of the results there. We couldn't screen everybody because we ran out of staff. There were so many elders that wanted to be screened. And I think the take-home message is at the bottom, if you look at the 88 scores and the mini-cog scores, a large percentage of people probably need a clinical evaluation, and these people are being missed. So the last thing, I'm not going to play this video, my colleague Amanda probably will try, but we did a PSA, and it's a very touching PSA, so if she has time, she will play it. We did this with the Alzheimer's Disease Research Center at the University of Washington. So thank you to all the research participants, to all of our faculty and staff, NIA, and the Alzheimer's Disease Research Center at the University of Washington. Thank you.